Hey YouTube, it's Dawn and Ivy here with Writers and Recs. We are. I know that the lighting on my camera is kind of shoddy, and I look like a pirate. Ooh,
Or get it like a parrot
yeah.
or
Um,
peg leg or both.
no, no peg legs. My balance sucks anyway.
No, just the parrot.
Yeah. So this week we are going to be talking to you about. We've spoken about characters before, but now we're going to start getting into the nitty gritty of different characterizations. Today's characterizations are our favorite. This is where I personally start when it comes to my own writing, and that is with the villains. So, to me, a villain, I'm not now, I write, we all know I write paranormal. I say it profusely. I write paranormal. That is my wheelhouse. That is my jam. Um, to me, I know there's a difference between the antagonist and the villain. I'm talking about the purebred Lord Farquaad. I am talking. You aren't expecting me to go with Lord Farquaad, huh?
It's been a really long time since I've seen Shrek, but I can just see him in my mind, and it's been like a while. So like, I totally get it.
Yeah. I'm not talking about Lord Farquaad. I'm not talking. Well, I am talking about Lord Farquaad. I'm talking about um Russell Edgington from True Blood. I'm talking about Killmonger from Black Panther. I'm even talking about Claw from Black Panther because I actually appreciated him as a villain. Um and so I start out with the villain. Ivy enjoys my villains. She pre-reads a lot of my stuff, so she enjoys the people that I work with and how I end up crafting them. And usually it's from a perspective of, I want to say that like with All the Glitters, when I did Faust, he was more of the claw type villain where I just want to see the world burn just to see the world burn. I have this power. I want to do what I want, and no, you can't stop me because I can. Um, Whereas I have someone from the Murder of Crows series, Olivia, where she's coming from a, I know I'm doing bad things, but it is for a greater good sort of thing, where she knows, she's like, I already know I'm the bad guy. I already know I am the fall guy. I already know that people are going to try to stop me, but what I am trying to do is going to help. Um let's see, who else was there? uh I am not going to get into the villains of Tempered.
Yeah, I was gonna ask because it's the X
Yeah,
and
that's,
Coffee Spears is newer or stuff, and I probably
yeah,
would.
that one's pretty. Tempered is pretty
Yeah.
new, so that one was out in September. The one coming, you have not read Stolen Moments yet.
No, not yet. I've heard a lot
Oh,
about it bit by bit, but I haven't seen who's the villain in book two and stuff. So and how that works out.
yeah, so I enjoy weaving tales where the villains, that they are the, I like, there's I'm stuttering and I do apologize. The two concepts of villains that I work with are the ones that either one, want to watch the world burn, or two, that they truly and honestly believe that they are the heroes of their own story, which
Yeah.
is where Killmonger comes into play.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. So Eric Killmonger, if for those of you that don't know, where have you been? Eric Killmonger is played by Michael B. Jordan in the Black Panther movie from Marvel. If you have not seen Black Panther, stop this video, go watch it.
Yeah, we'll
Wait.
wait. We'll wait. It's okay. No, I'm serious. to interject a little, like I have taught a class for the RWA online, some of their chapters about the psychology of villains, because technically my day job is many variations of psychology. But I do a psychology of villains, and it's sort of a mix of explaining psychological principles, but then I pick not necessarily villains, but for villains or anti-heroes that I think are really interesting and how the stories are handled well or aren't in movie medium. So I pick Jean Grey's Dark Phoenix arc, which obviously is handled terribly in both movie versions of it, but also Hannibal in his film in Silence of the Lambs, and this is where it's a little fuzzy is Harley Quinn from. I talked about her in Suicide Squad versus her characterization in Birds of Prey, which is really more of an anti-hero who's sort of snarky, but I like it. And then of course Eric Killmonger, because I think he's such a good villain in that half the stuff he says to, I can't pronounce words, T'Challa, you're like, that makes sense. Like some of his like, he's got grievances that make perfect sense and are completely sympathetic. B, he's seen more of the real world in a lot of ways than T'Challa has. And C, like you're like, well, would it be that wrong? I mean, it wouldn't be that wrong, but some of the stuff he says to make so much sense. You're like, kind of get it. Like technically you can't start a genocide against everybody, but you wouldn't really be wrong because they did it first. So like, and like some of the stuff he does, eventually his cousin is like, sorry, spoiler, but it's like been 3 years. So, or 2 years. So get watching that movie. But you know, eventually some of the things that he wanted to do, which was getting more out into the community and not just hiding Wakanda away as like a secret place, eventually in his own way T'Challa does. Like he starts saying, oh yeah, we have vibranium, oh yeah, we're way more advanced than you think we are, oh yeah, we're going to start helping places, like getting in science initiatives that Shuri's leading in Oakland and stuff and things like that. So it's not what his cousin ideas were wrong, it was the degree to which they were, which made him more interesting because like they were so close in like what they wanted, except you know,
Yeah, it
you
was
can't
like
kill
that
people,
just
but some of the ideas
one.
were right.
Yeah, it's that one point that changed Killmonger Killmonger from being a hero or an anti-hero. He that it's the degree.
Yeah,
It really is, because the child wanted to do the same thing.
that's
He
why I think it's so interesting, because we talk about mirroring heroes and villains, but that's such a great mirror of the two, not just because they're both by blood, because they're from the same royal family, but because deep down they both want it to be like, you know, Wakanda can't be isolationist forever. It's just, you're right, the degree part.
that is a lot of the "we're not so different, you and I" trope, but no one
Yeah.
said it. Damn
No, they didn't have to say it. It
it.
wasn't done in a cheesy, over the top, like heavy. It just, you got to see it,
Yeah,
and that, I think that's the difference, is you got to see it in practice, and the movie trusted you to be smart enough to go, oh yeah, they're similar. I get it.
yeah.
Like without going, let's have a big villain speech that's super over the top, which would have killed it and made it more cheesy, I think. So, but I
But
think
it
Killmonger
would
is one of my favorites.
but it would have fit in with every other Marvel movie.
Oh yeah, no, don't get me wrong. I haven't. I fell apart with like watching all the Marvel, so don't like sue me, world. But like I know the spoilers and stuff, which aren't spoilers anymore. But I
Yeah,
haven't kept up with every single Marvel movie because grad school isn't like that. Um, but
I
like
also.
I will say that Marvel sometimes is weak on its villains. I don't think I'm like wrong with saying that.
No, you're not.
Sometimes yeah, you know, Age of Ultron or whatever, it's kind of like whatever. But like the other villain I kind of like, and maybe this is a me thing, and I don't even remember his actual name. It's just in Captain America Civil War, I kind of like that the guy orchestrating all the stuff behind the scenes so that the Avengers fall apart is a citizen of, God help me, it's been a while, Segovia or whatever. So he lost his whole family. So like he's like, yeah, there's a lot of blowback from losing and being in the middle of these big battles. And like I get it, it can be a little bit cloying, or like
Baron
it lost
Zemo.
his family. So but like it makes sense to me that like it's not always someone who's like Thanos is out to get you. Sometimes people are like pulling puppet strings behind it. It's because you know, you haven't even thought about how you've like screwed their lives up because it's such a small thing. You know, that was one day in Segovia for you guys, but it was that guy's entire life got ruined, even if you meant the best. So
Okay, 2 points. Yeah, that was Baron Zemo.
sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine because I own all of the Marvel movies, so I know this. That was Baron Zemo, and two, that leads us to another villain that I immensely enjoyed when they ported him into a movie, and that is the late, the great Raul Julia as M. Bison in the Street Fighter movie.
I knew we were gonna get more into Street Fighter as a movie because we talked about it as an adaptation. So I
Yeah,
know you're gonna let it go. So I
yeah.
mean, not let it go, but like really dig into it, like let it rip.
So, okay, for all of its faults, and there are many faults,
Well,
the
everybody loves Raul Julia though.
I know
He was
because
great.
the man, the man, the myth, the legend. He was great in everything that he did. Um, when they gave him the best lines in that movie, and again, he was a villain that he just wanted to watch the world burn because he could. He had the power to do it. Um, and I don't know if anyone has seen it because it's been like damn near 20
I have
years.
not. I've seen a YouTube like commentator channel like talk about it and dissect it, and I've seen some of the memes like where it's like, of course. So like I've seen clips, but I haven't seen it all in context.
Okay, there's one scene where two of his best lines. One is one scene, Wes Stooney is playing Sagat, and Sagat has an eye patch. Ken and Ryu were supposed Ryu pronounced in the movie. So Ken and Ryu were supposed to be infiltrating Sagat's gang to get to Bison. And they're supposed to be working for Guile and a whole bunch of shenanigans. Excuse me. Um, well, when it comes time for Guile to attack, now Sagat thinks that Guile is dead because Ken and Ryu they faked his death and all of that jazz. And Sagat is like, Guile, how? Like, how is he here? And Raul Julia goes and he just turns around and he's like, because he sent his two henchmen in here and faked his death. But you didn't see that, did you?
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I can hear, like, I can, because I know how his inflection works from his other
Yeah.
film work. I can see it in my head. That's how like strong
It
an
was
impression he
like,
made.
it was so insulting, so condescending. And it was like, that is movie gold.
Yeah.
And like you felt insulted or Sagat because you're like, this dude just went there. And another line, which is by far, hands down, the best line. Ming Na, at the time, she was going by Ming
Oh,
Na.
wow. Like from Agents of
Mulan.
S.H.I.E.L.D. and Mulan and everything.
Yeah.
Oh, she must have been a baby back then. She could have been more than
She
like in her early 20s.
she played Chun Li. She made a great Chun Li. I'm just gonna say
And
that.
she's great in everything. I mean, I'm a huge May from S.H.I.E.L.D. fan. She's great.
So she was going on about how he went into her village and slaughtered everyone and killed her father, and that is why she's after him for revenge. And yeah, that is pretty much Chun-Li's storyline, but she wasn't from a little village. Her father was a cop and Bison killed her father. Not necessarily slaughtered her entire village, but totally besides the point. It's not like I'm being fussy about canon. I'm totally being fussy about canon.
Did
um
you make a movie that didn't understand its own canon? Say it ain't so.
and so she's going on and on and on while he's removing the Bison, like his hat. He's going from his big leather jackets and everything into a smoking jacket. He's putting a different hat on. No, he's supposed to be putting on his lounge wear. And she's like standing there in chains and whatnot. And she's explaining all of this. And he's just walking through and he just goes, and when she's done, he's finally like, the day Bison walked into your life, it changed you forever. But for me, it was Tuesday. and she just went off. And I'm like, this dude
Sorry,
was
again, Raul Julia is he's
still.
like a Tim Curry type. He's such a strong he was such a strong presence with how he chose to do line readings. Like you can hear it in your head and you can see what he
Oh
would try
my,
and do. Like it becomes like emblazoned, so you can sort of see what he would do even if I haven't seen it. I'm like, oh yeah. I can see him doing that and just digging it in with like aplomb.
and I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about it, and I'm just like, there are a combination of actors that you would be like, okay, they they would have they would never worked together
Yeah.
because the two of them on screen would just make everything explode.
Yeah.
Raul Julia and Tim Curry in the same movie would have done that. It would have been epic in its
Yeah,
sarcasm.
it's like a villain duo somewhere. That would have been like too much for the world to handle. It would have
Yeah,
been amazing though when Raul Julia was alive and Tim Curry was feeling well.
better. Yeah.
Would have been amazing.
There's another combination that would be epic in their villainy if they ever got a chance to work together. Not on the same series, because they were on the same series. I do believe they were on the same series. Yeah, they were. Just not together.
Okay.
Bill Nighy and Charles Dance.
Oh yeah, I get them mixed up too. Isn't that awful? I'm so like they're both British and old. But yeah, no, I know what you mean. They would have been really great because they're both from like the Underworld movies, but different installments, right? I
Yes.
mean, Bill Nighy's all up in all that stuff.
Yes.
But
Bill Nighy was Victor
yeah.
in the Underworld movies. Charles Dance, he played another minor character that came into the Underworld series, but also everyone knows him as Tywin Lannister.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, they would be really intense together.
Yes, and it's like, give me give me a spy versus spy type movie
Yeah.
with the two of them going at it just in villainy and trying to like screw each other over. I would totally be there for that. I would
I
totally.
wouldn't even call what they do like those two guys chewing scenery. They're so like British and like proper. So it is, but it's like you're like Shakespeare version of chewing scenery, even though they're in utter crap. You're like, oh yeah, this makes sense, even though it's just this weird ass movie.
Listen, Bill Nighy was the only, well, that and besides Aaron Eckhart with no shirt on, but that's my
Yeah, I was like
that's
Frankenstein. I have like 3 scars if you squint. I love I Frankenstein. I watch it all the time when I put on really terrible movies in the background when I'm writing, either for school or for like fiction. I don't know, they just are background noise at this point. They include such luminaries as The Covenant, The First Underworld, and I Frankenstein, which is terrible. And it's like basically just Underworld with Control F and like copy pasting like gargoyles and demons for
yeah,
vampires and werewolves. But yeah, no, Bill Nighy's great in that too.
yeah, he really is.
He's just fun.
Yeah,
So I
he like devours the scenery that he's in.
But he feels classy when he does it. You're like, oh, British dude, I got this. I'm ready for my
Like
Shakespeare class.
there are some people that when they chew the scenery, you're just like, no, he has a fork and a knife, and he's just like,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, yeah. You're like, okay. So with me and villains, I mean, I want to say first because I don't think Dawn recognizes this or she didn't mention it, but she comes from such a history of like anime that I think it infiltrates in a good way how she writes her villains. Because I feel like anime, and I judge this not just because I watch a lot of I've watched some anime. Let me dial that back. But honestly, Nobody Kill Me. Watched a lot of Power Rangers, which has a similar idea where the villains are almost their own sort of like half the show with these very intricate,
Mm-hmm.
power struggles and hierarchies, and they all sort of betray each other or want to betray each other, or at least one ends up on the good team side by the end of it. And it's just it's almost as complicated, if not more so, than the hero's own hierarchy and sort of family group. I think you bring that, especially with Murder of Crows, but I see you bring that to your stories where the villains own hierarchy and I think you did that too with my brain is blanking, the one that's from Once Upon a Villain, because you've got Faust, but Faust works for other people and people work for Faust, and they all sort of have to relate to the fact that they've got their contracts to serve, so they kind of get along, but they're all are like, if I ever had a chance to get out of my contract, I would. Like, we work together, we're companionable, but we're not friends. So like you create these hierarchies within the villains where like they might be kind of a messed up Fubard found family to an extent, but like don't think they're not gonna like stab each other in the back for that promotion or that way out of their dilemma, which makes it a really interesting dynamic to read because even there's never like one solo villain most of the time. Even like in other things you've written, and I won't say much, there's like a group or people sort of together on a purpose, but like there's always the interaction where it's a, sort of a villain team versus like a hero team, in the fact that the villains have their own nuances and they interact with each other, so you learn more about who they are and like how they stand, not just within their own villain community, so to speak, but like, you get more people's personality when you interact with them. And it's like, it's actually like that Bison quote, like, that was just another Tuesday for me. Like, oh yeah, we just did this horrible thing, but then everybody has to go chill out and like make, you know, digging at other people comments and sarcasm to their work companion. Cause we all have that work guy that I wish I weren't paired with you, but I am because the boss said so. And you get that side of villains, which I don't think you always see in fiction or in paranormal fiction. And I don't think you always see it to that degree, where you basically have sort of, there's the A plot or the A side of here's our heroes, we're rooting for them. That's probably 60-75% of the book, but we still get more glimpses of the villains than just they come in, they wreck stuff. Sometimes you'll see, oh, they come in and they have this really intricate life that actually doesn't just stop when they're doing like horrible things to the hero, which I think a lot of villains you don't get to see that with. So I think that's always something that you do so well that you're almost like, I just want to read a villain book, which almost is, to be honest, the stuff with the Once Upon a Fairy Tale, because you really are from that perspective where people
Yeah.
are getting redemption, but you see that whole world of, oh, that's how all these entanglements and favors and deals have been made and how all these people are set up in their roles of being basically enforcing for Faust, whether they want to or not, or whether once upon a time they were villains and they are hoping for more. It's all, no, you're all entangled in this essential underworld, and now what are you going to do about it and how are you going to relate with each other, which I think is gives them just so much more depth than you get in most paranormal, because it's like, yeah, people, you have definitely have characters who want to watch the world burn, but they're surrounded by other characters who have different degrees of who they are and what they believe, and they all feel three-dimensional and fleshed out, and more than that, like three-dimensional fleshed out and bickering with coworkers, which is super relatable. So it's always fun to me to see that. And so like I credit that to you, to that more because it comes from that anime sort of, I think, Eastern cartoon perspective, or even, gosh help me, um the you know Power Rangers comes from the original footage over there, but it's like the same idea of the villains have a lot going on all the time too, and like they have things they're always jockeying for position with, and it just adds a lot of layers. So I will definitely say people read her, but also hats off to you for creating these worlds where the villains are almost as interesting as the heroes. If you're not just like, I just want like a villain like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern of their misadventures all day long to the whatever your heroes are off doing, Don. So that's great. I will say that for
Time I might want to write that now.
yeah, you might, for Frozen Ashes and Smoldering Shards, which is the book I co-wrote with my girlfriend and co-writer Midnight Voss. We thought really hard about what we were doing. I mean, we wrote it back in, I want to say 2017, 2018, because I think it came out in January 2018, but it was written a little earlier than that.
Okay.
But God help us, so naive. We're like, the main villain is a politician, and we're like, oh, we need to make him new. I know, right? Adorable. We're like, we need to make him nuanced. He can't just like, twirl a mustache and have a dark hat on and eat babies or whatever. Back in the days when politicians, you thought maybe we can make them slightly subtle, but bear with, because like in a book, I want to say this just because in real life, some people really are basically cartoon characters who suck more than your average cartoon character,
Yeah.
Cheeto, and others. In a book, that's not interesting. You can't just have someone who is literally the worst exemplar of everything you can imagine and then throw that in there. Like, even I'll go back to comics. Like Lex Luthor is interesting because like in it, he's one of those, a lot of the times, a way I've seen him, at least in more modern portrayals, like in Smallville, like in the comics in the last 20 years, it's not, oh, I'm gonna do stupid land deals, mwahaha, or oh, I'm a mad scientist. It's, I think I'm doing the right thing because I think that no one can have that much power and aliens make me nervous. And he's not completely wrong that an alien with basically unlimited godlike powers could go badly. But so for Jenny and I, or Midnight and I, the problem was thinking about like, how do we avoid making this someone, especially even in that ethos of feels longer than 2.5 years ago, doesn't it? 8,500 years ago. How do we make the politician someone who, yeah, they're doing terrible things, but we can relate to them, or at least not root for them, but understand why they are doing it. And it's not just because I want to be a terrible person who's super greedy all the time. So basically, we started with, again, even at that time, it was like, there's only one politician on everybody's mind on the planet. So we're like, no, we're not going to base off that because, again, it's too one dimensional. Only in reality, where we also have murder hornets, is that a real thing. So it was actually, to be honest, the model was more like a Paul Ryan type, where they are more sort of average, or like they look attractive, I guess. They go to the gym, they're, mid 30s or 40s. They seem like kind of an overgrown frat dude, I guess, who sort of, become into politics because they come from like a wealthy family, blah, blah. So like they're aesthetically, they say the right things at the right time, kind of for a sound bite. You could trick yourself into thinking they're not like terrible. But the deal was basically, the story is that there's a thief and a dragon shifter, and the dragon shifter has come to our world to look for an egg that's been stolen, because eggs from dragons are great and magical and wonderful when they're kept in their own world, but the magic that leaks out of them can cause humans to go insane and get very, very sick and eventually die with basically a hemorrhagic fever. And if it's left too long out in our world, the fever can spread from people to people like a pandemic. So, if you leave it too long in human hands, everybody gets sick and dies, and it's terrible. And they get infected with just too much of magic overload that human bodies can't handle.
So basically, your story was way ahead of its time.
Yeah, it totally was. Except there weren't actually dragons that I know of involved in current timeframes. But what happens is that once a long time ago, the main guy, the politician, and I cannot remember his name right off the top of my head because it's been a while, but his brother Clay accidentally got exposed to a dragon as a very young child, and like the magic of that infected him, and he sort of has always been kind of I want to sound mean, but like kind of like Drusilla from Buffy, just like he sees things that aren't quite all there because he's actually tuned into stuff that is in the room, but no human can perceive it. So it can come off as kind of mentally ill. So the politician, since they were like maybe very small and he was maybe 7 or 8 years old, has always felt like he has to take care of his brother, because the one time he didn't, his brother got infected, and something when happened out on the docks, and his brother was never okay again, and now it's just the two of them, and he has to take care of his brother. And so part of his mentality, and like, yeah, some of his mentality in grabbing power is awesome. Who doesn't want to be like a senator, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
But part of it is, if I have enough resources, I can keep protecting my brother, and B, researching a way to fix him, if he can be fixed. So there is this I need to protect family motivation, which again doesn't justify all the horrible things he does to try and get his hands on the dragon egg and to try and thwart our heroines. But you can understand that there's a lot of powerful emotion, like with the originals, that comes from protecting your family. May not be right, but a lot of us can understand, I love my family, I do a lot to protect them, that would probably be pretty shady. So yeah, we worked really hard on that aspect, where maybe you don't want to deal with like golden boy politician who's saying all the right things with the correct dog word code whistles, but you can still hear the, jingoism and nationalistic under the surface kind of thing. Again, like a Paul Ryan type.
Yeah.
But I understand that if I felt responsible for my brother being permanently injured, I would try and do anything to try and fix it if I thought I could, even if it's super misguided and wrong, and there's a lot of selfish motivation in it too. And also, not that Clay, I would say Clay is more of an antagonist in that, because he's not completely out of the loop with what's going on in the world. He's kind of in and out because he just can't deal with what he can perceive now, because it was never meant for humans to see it. But I would say he's almost like a passive evil, because he knows things are going on with that egg. He knows how fragile eventually, when his family gets a hold of it, the dragon child inside of it is, and if it's kept away too long from the dragon world, it's going to die. And he sort of develops a bond with it, even if it's not hatched yet, and that kind of stuff. So it comes to the point of like, he's allowing his brother, even if he's in a very sort of weakened position, to keep doing all these really horrible things that contravene the heroines, Seth and Minerva. But like, he comes to a point where, and I don't want to spoil things, even though it's been a while and it still has to be reissued for publication, yada, yada, yada. But it's like the passive evil of like, I know my brother's doing really terrible stuff, but it does benefit me. So if I just keep going on with the program I've gone along with for the last 20 years, I might actually get better, or do I really sacrifice this innocent being and let it die? So it does explore both those aspects of like an evil that's pleasing on the surface if you don't think too hard about it and is still deep down helping their family, but also on the other hand, a more passive evil of like, if I just don't say anything, I keep getting benefits. So could you blame me? So again, because in fiction, we try and have villains that are nuanced, even though in real life, we apparently gave that up. So.
Well, there is, when it comes to writing, when we're doing villains, I would also suggest that now here's where we get to the educational part of our story. I'm sorry if you see me like constantly going at my eye and taking off my glasses and whatnot. It's because I think an eyelash fell in, and it's like irritating the whole like right in here of my eye. So yeah. Um.
Being
So
able to see is fun.
yeah, if you
But I know how it feels from having contacts. If it gets,
yeah
if stuff gets in your eye, you're just like miserable. So you can try to find a way to get rid of it.
yeah. Um. So when it comes to crafting your villains, what is the first thing that you normally do?
You me?
Yeah.
I think.
And this is helping, and this is trying to help the people at home.
Honestly, maybe I'm guilty, but I'm usually, and maybe this is not the way you do it. I think you think about your villains first.
Yeah.
But I usually think about, even if it's a romance story, there's usually one hero or hero, well, hero or heroine who's a little bit more prominent. So I kind of think about who my sort of slightly more of a lead character is. And I'm sorry, they're not too different, you and I. Like, what would be a good foil, or what sort of reflects and distorts that aspect of the hero, or what would grate against the hero or heroine that much.
Mm-hmm.
So that was part of it, because I think, at least in the story that Ginny or Midnight and I made, the more lead of the heroine I feel like is Minerva, because she's sort of our bridge character, because it is an urban fantasy. So she's the one who lives in this world. She's a thief who's grown up. In her case, she has no family. She was rejected by her family, so she's been living on the streets very creatively by like sneaking into rich people's houses and stealing like stupid artifacts and heirlooms they're never going to use anyway, and pawning it. So like, and then it contrasts with someone who has one part of family left and will literally do anything for it. So I think that's kind of an interesting way to deal with it. And then in other stories, it's just the idea of like what kind of inverts it. So I think that's one part, is like, what is my hero or heroine doing, and how does the villain go from there? And then I think, secondly, when I'm working on the villain, like, how are they the hero of their own story? Again, for that nuance side, you know, I do have I do have villains who just kind of are jerks who want the world to burn. Because in The Golden Stag, which is a sort of a short urban fantasy based on a pretty obscure, but I love it, so do check it out, fairy tale called The Golden Stag. They're basically, it's their evil stepmother. So like, she's not that nuanced because it's an evil stepmom, and she just kind of wanted, you know, all the stuff dad had because he was rich and he had a lot of resources and it's fun to steal. But at the same time, I think she's been interesting, and because she was able to take advantage of something that one of the three children caused themselves without realizing it. Basically, one of the three kids came into their abilities and accidentally caused the car accident that like killed their dad, but kind of blanked out on it and just blamed the stepmother for it. So like, at the right time, she's like, yeah, that's your fault. So like, it's kind of fun to even have one that watches the world burn, who can be like, yeah, you suck harder than you think, hero. But I guess for my steps, my first stage is, to be honest, what is my hero or heroine, the lead, like? What reflects and distorts that with a mirror image in the villain? But then as I'm digging into the villain, what really motivates them? Like, why are they justified? Like, why is what they're doing, at least in their head, something they think they have to do? Like, for the Chameleon, which is sort of my male superhero fantasy I've been working on, the main villain there is kind of a Thanos type, is kind of a sort of, you don't see them pulling all the strings, and they have a lot of power because they're from another dimension. Basically, the premise of the Chameleon is people develop superpowers because stuff like the Project was real, and people were able to the Philadelphia experiment was real, and armies were starting to open like portals and try and do teleportation during World War II, and it let all sorts of energy and other bad stuff you shouldn't be experimenting with into the world, and it mutated people. But the sort of the villain who's pulling the strings there is from the other dimension, and the reason they've been pulling the strings and trying to set things up and trying to foobar everything here is because when we started on our side messing with portals, it ended up destroying great swaths of their dimension too, and like killing this individual's like most of their family and stuff like that. So it's like, oh, you're mad. Oh, you should be mad. We killed most of your family. And our bad. We were just screwing around and we ended up creating a whole wasteland where you're from. Like, again, you can see them feeling justified, because who wouldn't want to be like, you think I've messed with you? My entire home world or home dimension is now basically a wasteland because you thought it was fun to, I don't know, just invent machines and see what happens. Cool. Like, again, just that idea that, to me, it's how does it reflect the hero most of the time? Unless I just really want to go for like, yeah, I'm just the evil stepmom, which is fun too. And then the second is, how are they the hero in their own mind? How are they justifying their actions? Because like a Killmonger, eventually you can sort of see where maybe it's a degree, and you can go, okay, I can understand that. And then you're like, oh no, we went one too far or eight too far. So what about you?
Well, I like to figure out the world and then the villain. Like I'll sit back and like say Tempered. I'm not gonna give any spoilers or anything. My Et Lapis Sanguis series. All of that has book. There's five. There's supposed to be 5 books in that series, and each book you get to see there is one main villain that we hardly deal with, but he has connections to each and every other book. So you'll see more pieces of that puzzle. Um, I like to think of my villains as like my big villain as the puzzle, and the current book villain is my chaotic evil. One thing that I do, and I would recommend for everyone to do this, and so it will be in my Rex later. Look up the D&D character alignment chart. Neutral, good, lawful. What is it? Lawful, neutral, and true.
Chaotic, right?
Chaotic. Yeah.
See, I don't even play Dungeons and Dragons, but I've seen a lot of people on author boards or just in memes on author things show up like the differences between
Yeah.
chaotic, neutral, lawful, and it does help because then they'll put examples of who and pop culture, and it really grounds
It
it.
really does help.
And that's for someone who has no idea what D&D is. Like, I know what it is, but I've never played it.
Yeah. Though those are a huge help, because as soon as you understand, okay, I have a villain that is chaotic evil. So that means there's no length that he'll go to get what he wants. There is no end point for him. There is no stopping. There is no, oh, did I go too far? Seriously.
Yeah, that's a very, not like the Joker, the movie, but like the Joker and the Dark Knight, where it's like, I just like chaos. It's fun. I don't really have a plan. I'm just gonna.
Yeah, and that's why I say that Joker and the Joker in the animated series,
Oh yeah, definitely.
those were the best foils for Batman, because Batman always has a, that's one of like the big things about Batman, is that he always has a plan.
Oh yeah. He's a detective. I mean, he's smart. He's got the pre-planning, and he's like MacGyver before they had MacGyver.
Yeah, and with the Joker, there is no rhyme and reason.
Which means you can't foil it because there's no pattern to anticipate, which is the best part. That's something, I'm sorry, I'm derailing you already, but like that's why with the actual movie, which Joaquin Phoenix does a great job, I'm not saying he's not a good actor in it. I'm just saying that I don't need like a sob story for the Joker. I will say that again, I like the idea that maybe Thomas Wayne threw in action and just not doing anything but rolling in his own wealth, sort of created his own problems, and he's kind of villainous is an interesting take on it. As an antagonist almost to like the Joker in that, whose name I can't remember, Arthur. But like at this point becomes such a sob story, and you're like, I don't need that background, and I don't need that much motivation for chaos.
Well, see, here's the thing about the Joker and overly sarcastic productions. In one of their trope talks, they went and they did a little quick blip, and when you think about it, it is true. Out of all of Batman's rogue gallery, stop using the Joker so much. And
Yeah.
now, I love the Joker. Don't get me wrong. I'll sit back and I'll tell my daughter, I'll tell my kid all the time, this is a Joker-run facility. I have dubbed my house Arkham Asylum half the time, if you haven't really noticed. But if all you give is the Joker, then you don't see the little subtle nuances of Batman actually being a detective, of Batman actually being smart, of him having to face the likes of the Riddler, of Catwoman, of
Scarecrow, really, who's not as interesting, but they do all that stuff, and they were a doctor and blah 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 blah.
yeah,
So they have schemes.
yeah, and it's like his rogue gallery is massive.
So deep. Sorry, that sounds weird. We're romance authors, but you know what I mean. Yeah, if you compare it to Batman, to Superman, who has a lot, he has people. He's got like, see, my brain already blanked, but I mean, Superman has mostly Lex Luthor, but I mean, there's others. There's Metallo and
Superman's,
Zod, but it's not as
Superman's
interesting.
rogue gallery
It's
is
not just as deep. It's just not.
it's not as massive as Batman's. It
But
is.
Batman has such a colorful array of like basically every kind of villain you can think of, from Clayface on up to Two-Face to the Riddler to just
Yeah,
everybody, just
yeah,
crazy stuff.
yeah, and it's like, instead of taking that, now,
Sorry.
comment section, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like the majority of the Suicide Squad started as Batman rogues.
A lot of them did. I mean, I don't know like what the version is between the comics and like the movie, but like the movie itself had a lot of them were just like, because the Croc was, and then Ivy was, or sorry, Harley Quinn was. But like, yeah, I think
Deadshot.
a couple of them come in because they're the Flash, I guess, because he's like Boomerang or something. I don't even know.
Yeah,
But like, yeah, I mean, most of them feel like, because he has so many.
yeah,
Anything you do that's a villain adventure, like a Legion of Doom, is going to have like half Batman villains because he has like a million, and they're all interesting.
yeah,
And I think it's probably because they come from such a tradition of noir comics, and there's so many like underworld, seedy, Dick Tracy style kind of craziness you could do too, but just with superpowers.
yeah. But it's like everyone focuses on the Joker, and it's like when you focus on one, you're, first of all, you're diminishing the hero.
You're also like, people get tired of the same thing
Yeah,
eventually. There's only so many ways to play it.
yeah, because I don't know if you had seen on when they had announced Robert Pattinson being a younger Batman. I kind of went on a little tirade.
Sparkle Bat.
Yeah.
Sparkle Bat.
I went on a minor tirade where I was giving ideas for actual live action movies, and it's like, okay, instead of treading over how he became Batman again, instead of
What
treading
about
over a whole bunch of other things
the
that
Frank Miller stuff?
yeah, I went and I said, I was like,
Or
okay,
Batman Beyond?
how about doing Batman Hush, but this time being faithful to the comics, because they did an animated movie that was not that faithful to the comics.
Yeah.
The story of Hush is creepy and wonderful in and of itself. You could have sat back, they could have done a movie where they broke down how Dick Grayson became Nightwing.
Yeah.
Showed the whole fallout between him and Batman.
But if we just get the origin story on it, everybody knows it. Like, you could be honestly in the Andes mountains and they'd probably know it. Like, not to be like, oh, nobody knows anything about it. I'm just saying, like, you go to any corner of the planet and it's like Mickey Mouse or like Superman. Like, there are certain icons of like comics and like television, people know the basic stuff about, and he happens to be basically one of them. So we get it. He's an orphan, his parents died, blah blah blah.
That was one of the things that I appreciated, and this is segueing a little bit from the villain territory, but one of the things that I appreciated about Spider-Man Homecoming was we did not have to see Uncle Ben die
For like the third time. Yeah. So you're just like, there are certain things where you're like, we know. We all, as a collective consciousness, we know. Like, I mean, if you're gonna introduce me like they did in Guardians of the Galaxy to Groot, like, I'm gonna need a minute to digest that there's a talking tree. Like, I get that. Like, I don't know that one. But like, if you're gonna introduce me to Batman, like, I've seen the Adam West series and I've seen the Michael Keaton movies, and I saw the George Clooney movie, and I've seen the Batman animated series. Like, I get it. Like, Justice League Unlimited, like, I like all the Christian Bale movies, which are my favorites. Like, we know. Like, we all know. And like, if you saw Justice League the movie, no. Batman v Superman the movie, his mom was named Martha and she died, and that bounds him. I know, right? But like, we know. Like, you have to have lived under a rock since at least 1970s to not know this.
That's how I mark my bored days on Facebook. I'll just post up there out of nowhere, save Martha.
I know, right? Which I guess loops back to villains, because I don't even know, man. I think two of the biggest problems with some of the DCU films, not all of them, so don't get me wrong, but I know that for like Batman v Superman, the villains sucked. Like, basically it was Lex Luthor as played by Jesse Eisenberg, who was actually pretty chilling as Mark Zuckerberg, so I don't know why he couldn't take that same I'm Mark Zuckerberg, I'm a sociopathic billionaire energy just to Lex, but okay. But and it's just convoluted and it's terrible and no one cares, and the plot is no one cares, and they bond Batman and Superman because both their mothers' names are Martha, and I wish I were making this up, but someone got paid millions of dollars to write that as a screenplay. But like, I think one of the reasons that falls apart, and I think that the Joker scenes in Suicide Squad, I like Suicide Squad. I know it's a trash film. I get it. I do. But I still like it. And you'll claw it for my cold dead hands, because I think Harley Quinn is still pretty good in it. I think I like the way she and Deadshot bond as friends. I think it has some interesting aspects to it. I think that there were potential that got really buried. Fight me. I don't care. I like the scene where they're drinking in the bar and Harley tells...
That is the best scene.
The guy, own it. Like, you're a monster. You chose to do that. You own it. And I feel like there's something there that really intrigues me. It's also honestly more diverse than some of the other films, and like,
yeah,
DCU had like more than one woman in it. Like, I mean, most of them are playing a watered down version of Amanda Waller, but you still got Viola Davis. Like, it has a lot of potential, and it's not a good movie, but it has such gems and like little brief moments that I forgive it. But why it really sucks is they tried to force in this Joker storyline, and like, I'm glad that they had to go back to the cutting board and cut most of the Joker footage, apparently. Thank God. For reshoots when Guardians became so popular, they're like, let's make it funnier, blah blah. But the DC stuff really fails because their villains fail. At least some of the movies have failed badly because of that. And I think when you see Batman vs Superman and like their version of Lex is just, I don't even know what Jesse Eisenberg was doing. It's like kind of comedy over the top, and he's $150 soaking wet. And I know Lex is supposed to be intellectually the rival to Superman, but none of it works. Like, none of it works. And like, obviously the Leto Joker, none of that works. Like, he was just there to like do weird pranks to people off set and harass people and then not understand the Joker at all. And it falls apart because the villains that are supposed to be there, it's supposed to be intense, they don't do anything. You just cringe when they come on screen in the wrong way, because you're like, oh no, they decided this was a good idea.
Okay, my take on the DC movie, what is it, DCEU?
I think they're not extended anymore, or they're going to try more solo films.
I don't know, but
no one knows, to be fair.
The DC universe, the big problem with them is that not so much that they don't understand the villains, because Marvel has that same problem. Marvel doesn't, t- Black Panther aside,
It's true.
Black
I
Panther
like Loki
aside,
in the first Avengers, but I'm a big Loki fangirl, so forgive me.
um,
You mean British misanthropic and hot? Okay, yeah, I got you. Tons of daddy issues? Okay, I forgive you.
this is not the Tom Hiddleston thirst hour.
It is not, but it could be. But you
That's
know,
that's scheduled at 5.
I I get you. I get you. The Marvel villains aren't. I think maybe it's also the translation sometimes of comic villains too, because they are these grand, especially because you have such people with such powers, these
Well, see,
grand mystical forces. But damn, DC, you really.
here's the thing. Marvel doesn't understand its either, but Marvel understands its heroes.
True.
DC doesn't understand its heroes.
DC didn't understand anything. I do think that Wonder Woman was pretty good as a standalone. I did enjoy that.
Wonder Woman was great as a standalone movie for the simple fact that Patty Jenkins
Yeah.
got control of it, and Patty Jenkins knew what was riding on her shoulders. Meanwhile, if you have think so yeah, you have okay. Gonna do a deep dive here. We have on one hand Batman v Superman. Okay.
Yes. I'm so mad. I'm still mad at Martha. I'll never not be like, someone got paid to write this. What the fuck? Pay me. Sorry. Pay me. I could have done that in like 5 minutes.
Now, on the other hand, you have, let's take Ultron. Avengers Age of Ultron, because that is the most disliked out of the Avengers movies. Okay. Batman v Superman had a lot on it. That concept alone, that's a lot there to unpack. But DC, well, Marvel, they have these heroes. They're colorful heroes. They let them be colorful heroes. You have Tony Stark, that's a snarky, narcissistic jerk half the time, lovable jerk.
I was like, I love you, Robert Downey Jr., but I wonder if it's a little bit like, and not playing yourself. I'm sure he's a very nice man in real life, but I'm just like, I wonder if it works so well because he kind of is that dude and he can find that line between like coming off as a complete smarm ass and then actually just being funny.
I don't think he's that dude, but I think before his stint in prison,
Yeah.
he realized he could become that dude.
Yeah, I do feel like he had that in that side before he like turned his life around.
Yeah. So you have these colorful characters. You have these characters that are larger than life, and these actors that know these characters are larger than life, so they play them so that they're larger than life. Oh my God, you had Thor almost quoting Shakespeare, Kevin Branagh. I will not forgive you for
Kenneth Branagh.
forgive you for that. So yeah, he was the original director of the first Thor movie.
Yeah, which is fine. It's serviceable, but it's pretty forgettable.
Yeah. So out of all of that, you have someone that understands. Was it the Russo brothers that did Age of Ultron?
No, it was Whedon. Whedon did the first two, but then the Russo
Okay,
brothers did the
so
next set, including I think Captain America: Civil War, which is basically just an Avengers movie anyway.
yeah. So here you have this huge cast, and Whedon excels at that.
It's true.
And he makes them colorful. He makes them loud. He lets them run their own thing. He falls short on the villain because Ultron is a robot.
It's true.
Ultron should not be okay. James Spader as Ultron, awesome choice, because I love James Spader.
Oh no, there's rarely a better, like, I mean, he's the quintessential 80s villain of like just a complete jerky prep, but also can be super scary. And he's great as Red on the
on the blacklist.
Blacklist. Yeah, he's a
Yeah.
chilling dude.
Yeah. So the snark that Ultron had should not have been there.
Yeah.
It would have been way more effective if he would have looked at things coldly. If he did not have this jealousy complex with Tony Stark,
Yeah.
you know.
He should have been colder and analytical because that's what he
Right.
is. And like, again, Spader can do just plainly cold. He doesn't have to be always sarcastic. I've seen him in, I guess, things like Wolf, which is again not well known, but he's pretty cold in that. He's pretty
Yeah.
just psychopathic, and he does it fine because let's be honest, he's James Spader. That's what James Spader does.
Yeah. So then you have someone that understands, okay, these are bright characters, these are in your face characters, these are these things,
I
let
think
them run.
though with DC, it's because they have the three most famous characters because they got the Trinity with Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman. But I almost feel like they become like trapped in their own history and their own like reputation, where they like approach it with such reverence and like seriousness, and it just kind of sinks itself. I don't get it.
Oh, I'm about to
Cool. Because I was just like, the Trinity isn't quite exactly as loopy as like I'm a talking raccoon, but
yeah, to be fair, you are correct. The Trinity is not that out there, but a few years ago, well, quite some time ago, DC acquired, I believe it's Dark Horse Comics,
yeah, I think they are related now.
and one
Or no, is it Vertigo? Because Vertigo was their like more adult imprint till they folded this year.
well, Vertigo unfolded, but
Yeah.
They have
Don't at us. We're bad at comics. It's okay.
They have a writer that redefined all of their stuff. That gentleman's name is Alan Moore.
Oh yeah. That's definitely from Vertigo stuff.
He wrote Watchmen, and he wrote The Killing Joke.
I think Alan Moore also had a hand in some of the plot lines in Doom Patrol. Just whatever. But yeah, he definitely like undoes a lot of stuff.
So DC sees that Watchmen, which is a gritty, in-your-face comic, is successful. So now all of their stuff has to equate to Watchmen. Gritty, dark, in your face. Instead of, if you look at 90s Batman, if you look at Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah, I love Batman the Animated Series so much.
If you look at Justice League,
I feel like Bruce Timm gets the animated stuff so right.
If you look at Justice League Unlimited, if you look at the Adventures of Superman, the Adventures of Batman and Robin, Batman Beyond, all of that stuff, none of it had the weight that Watchmen did. Batman the Animated Series did an episode dedicated to domestic violence. Mad Love.
Which one is that one?
That's the one where Joker and Harley Quinn, where Joker beats the hell out of her and pitches her out of a window.
Oh, it's been a while since I have the DVDs. I just haven't watched them since.
Yeah, Mad Love is
like 2006.
Mad Love is basically a focus on the toxic relationship between Harley Quinn and the Joker,
which I definitely hate. I'm Poison Ivy fan for her, but obviously.
And whereas the episode ends, and this is the most chilling and the most infuriating thing about that entire episode. Out of everything that happened, the Joker pitched her out of a window. I think that was the episode where she caught Batman. She pulled a Pinky in Pinky and the Brain.
Yeah.
She caught Batman. She was this close to defeating Batman.
But then that would have made the Joker look bad, or like it would have ruined what he does.
The Joker flips out, pitches her out of a window. The episode ends. She is in the hospital in traction, talking about she's done with him. She's never going to deal with him again. It's over. It's this, it's that, whatever. and then someone carries in a thing of flowers. It's a thing of flowers, and the card on it says, my Harley, I'm so sorry, love. I don't remember if it says I think it says Mr. J or Puddin.
Probably does.
And then you see the Google eyes all over again, like, oh. And so you know she's going to go back to him, and so it infuriated me entirely. But again, even that was not as grimdark as The Killing Joke or Watchmen. And with as popular as those things became, well, people are like, okay, well, that's realism. That's what's selling. No, that's what you're putting out. So that's why it's selling.
Yeah, and I was gonna say that as another reason why I feel like Wonder Woman did so well is that it was Patty Jenkins I mean, it wasn't dark. Like it literally wasn't shot darkly. Like as opposed to like even Superman movies like Man of Steel, like you can barely see anything because it's all gray, or like the other stuff that came after. But like for Wonder Woman, it had its own tone that didn't match the rest of like the team up movies and blah blah, because it was like allowed to be brighter and allowed to sort of be sort of a fun commentary and like have subtle nods to feminism and like blah blah blah. It was allowed to be its own thing, and she chose to have a lighter tone that kind of matches Wonder Woman being a neophyte in our world, whereas everything else has been such
Except for
grim
Aquaman.
dark. Yeah, Aquaman was also different, and it did better because it was allowed to be like sort of. I'm not like a huge fan of that one. It's fine. I think it's kind of like a lesser version of Thor or like Black Panther because it's the same thing, like a hidden society, blah blah blah. It's not as interesting, but Jason Momoa's in it and he's hot, so it like works. But like let's be real. But like
Oh,
it's
I'm
good
about
for
to
what
look
it is because it's allowed to be funny. Like everything's allowed to be funny. And for the first time, someone like actually gives a crud about Aquaman because like who did before? No one, no one at all. So it works. But like yeah, the grimdark was the only tone for so long, and it was too much. Maybe they also thought that they had to do that as a contrast, also not just from what was selling for them as comics, but also because Marvel was like the bright, funny one, and like they're like, oh, if we like make the contrast, people will like see it, and I'm like, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
Which I think is also why I don't hate Suicide Squad, even though I probably should, from a technical filmmaking perspective, just because it's allowed to be funny. Like it's allowed to have like breaths where you laugh. The part where they interview Deadshot and they're like, okay, show me what you got. And he shoots all the stuff and he's like, I want you to send my daughter to Harvard. And if she ever grades ever fall, like, you know, take care of it. Like that white people shit you do. I'm like, I don't see you writing anything down. And it's very funny. It's like, it's Will Smith. He's being funny, of course. But
Yeah.
like, it's funny in a new way for him. Like a lot of sarcasm in a different way. And like, it's funny. And like, I love Birds of Prey because you got the unreliable narrator and a lot of the stuff that happens is funny. And a lot of the fight scenes they're good fight scenes, but they have a little of a Jackie Chan-esque to them where unusual props or unusual situations are put up. So they're fight scenes that have the intrigue of also being somewhat hilarious in certain situations. And they're allowed to be funny, but like for a long time with Man of Steel and Batman v Superman and the Justice League, whether we see the Snyder Cut or not, I mean, we're supposed to on HBO Max in like a year, so okay. But like they were grimdark, they were literally physically hard to see, and it wasn't interesting. And then they let some of the other films as the EU fell apart, like be whatever they wanted to be in tone, and they started to choose like I'll be funny, or I'll be literally bright enough to see, or I'll be like a more of a Marvel type movie, and it did better. I mean, I'm not saying Birds of Prey was like a big success. I mean, it tracks similar to like the way Kingsman's first run as like a movie and like some modest profits. But I do really love it. Make another one in the world. But this doesn't mean they didn't have a scary villain because I find for me that the villain there, it'll come to me in a minute. Ewan
Black
McGregor's
Man.
character, Black Mask, yeah. I was trying to remember his actual name, but
Ewan
he's very
McGregor.
no, his no. The actual name of the Black Mask character, he's like a mobster. They're all mobsters.
Roman Sionis.
That's it. Thank you.
Oh,
And like thank you. Um, so like Roman is like a mobster, and you're like, okay, he's kind of over the top. You know, Ewan McGregor's having a fun time. In this case, chewing scenery, being an over the top nightclub owner. But when it comes time to like do the crap, he's really intensive and like they cut away. I mean, it's still an R, but they cut away. So like he will not like you, and if you cross him, he'll slice your face off and your family's face, and he'll slice a 13-year-old girl's face off. He doesn't care. He'll like completely humiliate you as a woman. And they were because Kathy I think it's Yang, but like the person who directed the movie, she didn't like focus on things like the male gaze for that. But like it's humiliating and scary when he like thinks a woman's laughing at him at the table, so he pulls her up to the top of the table and says like dance for everybody, and like makes her like her stuff doesn't fall off too much, but he like makes her sort of take it down to, like over her shoulders, and you can tell that a male director would have made her go like down to just her underwear because it's not fun. But he's very threatening in a very honestly domestic abuser kind of way, because especially I think his relationship with um Dinah and slash Black Canary, because she's the singer, she works for him right now, and like there are good parts to like being sort of supported and fed by him essentially because that's her job. But in a minute he'll change and be that guy who will slice your face off, and it's a menace. I understand it's a menace. I think a lot of women watching the movie understand that sort of lightning quick temper of he likes me now. Not that I've had that in my personal life, but like, oh no, he's gone to like complete dark side of things. And that was effective in a way that something like in Suicide Squad, say the Enchantress, which was sort of an abstract concept, isn't. Or like in the Justice League movie, Steppenwolf just isn't, because he's like an alien, he shows up and wants some boxes. So like there's a lot of menace and just personal. And I think whether you like it or not, or you think it's sort of a retread of stuff we've already seen with some of the Marvel movies, that in Aquaman, because some of what the tension is with him and his half brother, that at least brings a familial element to it, at least brings family side. And then there's Black Manta and all that other stuff that sort of happens. But like
Aquaman should not, in my opinion, don't get me wrong, I enjoy Aquaman. I don't think that movie should have fallen the way they did, and I blame Batman movies for it.
yeah,
If you haven't noticed, ever since Batman Returns, any movie by DC has to have two villains.
yeah, I think that's why I'm so nervous. I mean, besides the fact that Sparkle Batman is they have like 8 villains or something in the Robert Pattinson one. It's like, now we've got Penguin, now we've got Catwoman. I'm like, you can't put them all in the same movie. Like, you can't have everybody at once, guys. That's not how this works.
If they would have done the Aquaman movie where it was just him, and Orm, then that could have been a way more focused movie. And Patrick Wilson, he is a sleeper actor. And I say that because he's the type of person that he's becoming this era of movies that asshole. Excuse my
Well, I
language.
really love him in the Conjuring stuff, so that's where he gets to be like not a jerk. But
Meanwhile, I know him as the stupid idiot Raoul in the Phantom of the Opera movie.
oh yeah,
I know him as Agent Lynch in the A-Team movie, which is kind of it's an adaptation, it's a remake, it's a cheesy one, but I love it. What can I say? Um, he was also in Watchmen. He played the Night Owl dude, the Batman counterpart, and he's like this actor that can do pretty much, from what I've seen, he can do pretty much anything. And what Aquaman failed to do, because they were trying to do
a lot.
They were trying to do Arthur's backstory, the thing with Black Manta, and the thing with Orm. If you would have taken out Black Manta and just focused on Arthur and Orm, that would have allowed Patrick Wilson to chew scenery the way I know he can.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think they do. I think that's a good point, that they do too much. They are like, here's 8 villains. I'm like, I can't concentrate on 8 villains. I need you to like build up one in a
Yeah.
realistic way that I give a crud about them, as opposed to like, I'm Steppenwolf, I need boxes. I'm gonna stand here and like laugh maniacally for 2 hours, and I'm gonna be like,
Yeah. So
cool.
Steppenwolf was trying to get the boxes, and then they had to fight against Superman. They had Superman, Batman, and Batman v Superman. The two villains were whichever one you weren't rooting for, and Lex Luthor. And then Abomination?
No, it was in
Oh,
which one? Batman v Superman. It was Doomsday.
Doomsday.
But they
Okay.
handle it so badly because Doomsday is literally the villain who kills Superman, so he should have should have gravity of its own, and it should be really their own movie should be in Doomsday, and then there should be more of a draw out before Clark comes back, like because that was such a phenomenally big storyline in the comics, like in the early '90s, that like there should be a lot more weight to it,
Oh
and
my
it was
God,
just like
Superman is
Doomsday was
dead.
a side one.
You're
Yeah,
like,
he's just a
yeah,
side
really.
guy to
Um,
whatever Lex was doing with kidnapping Martha. I'm sorry, never gonna get over that. If you take anything away today, don't make your two heroes friends because their moms have the same first name. Like that's not good. That's and then your villain shouldn't be scary because he kidnaps the hero's mom.
okay, there is an animated movie. Now, there were two animated movies
I feel
technically.
like this became the DC hour, which is not bad. I just feel like I'm sorry that's what happened, guys. But DC and Marvel together are like kind of where we get all our big villain soap opera stories in the movie business right now. And DC needs a lot of help, is what I'm saying. More so than Marvel.
Yeah. Um
They need like life support levels of help sometimes.
there are two animated movies. One is called Superman Doomsday, and one is literally called The Death of Superman. Those two movies handled the death of Superman way better than Batman v Superman did.
And
I
they were like seeing it as a stepping stone because we got to make a Justice League movie. I'm like, it's probably the biggest, most famous Superman plotline there is, and you did not. You're just like treating it like I gotta get through it,
not
gotta
only
rush it.
not only that, but then you also have the added expectation of every fanboy's wish,
Yeah, that's true too.
because every every person that considered themselves a DC comic fan wanted to see a fight between Batman and Superman.
I remember in I Am Legend, there's just a joke in the burned out husk of Times Square because it's made by Warner, and there's just a poster in the background, one of the billboards for Batman v Superman. I was like, that is the coolest thing ever. It plus the German Shepherd were my two favorite parts of that movie because the German Shepherd is a great actress and then she died, but that's okay. Not the dog, just the character, of the dog. Like no one killed a dog, that'd be bad. But like that's the
No
kind
one
of
kills a dog.
anticipation.
That's how you end up with John Wick.
Yeah, no, that's how anticipation builds up, and then you're like, oh, they're friends cuz mom. I'm sorry, I will never get over that. But also, yeah, I mean, I think the fight that they build up to is, I think sometimes it's like 8 minutes. I mean, you can't have a whole movie; it's just one long fight. But they definitely didn't accommodate
Here is
like
looking at
that
you,
part.
Dragon Ball Super and Akira Toriyama.
So it was just like it was. I mean, you can't please anybody's build up for something that people have been thinking about probably since they read it in the comics and like 40 or 50 years ago. But they could have done
They
better.
could have
I'm
done
just
more.
saying
They could have
they
done
were not doing great. But is it one of those movies they're trying to do too much? Is it a Batman sort of Frank Miller style, older Batman? He's all pretty injured and like tired of this crap, and he's in his 40s now. Movie? Is it is it a Doomsday film? Is it Wonder Woman's introduction? Is it a follow up to Man of Steel where Clark's dealing with the fallout of people not liking aliens or being afraid of him personally? And they're trying to do like four things at once and they don't do any of them.
Yeah, they don't nail any of them. When you have too much, now let's
Reel it back, yeah.
reel it back in. When you try to do too much with your villains, when you're trying to do too much with your story to begin with, you may have to sit back and reevaluate, because what we're talking about are 2, 3, 4 hour epics that could go on.
Yeah,
Which,
exactly.
whereas your book will be 100, maybe 100,000 words, depending on what genre you write.
And you
I
say, oh, I'm an indie author. That won't happen to me. But also, you've got to
a
be
lot.
real. Well, I need to talk about my own do as I say, not as I do. But realistically, you've got to pay for, if you're going to print it in print, considering a certain size, it has to go into like a print version. You also have to consider the fact that editing costs so much, usually per word, or a flat rate per set of words. So if you all of a sudden have 150, 200,000 word epic, A, that's really long for people to be like, I'll sit down and read that. But B, editing will cost you so much, you'll never, like, it's hard to get back anyway with an 80,000 word book. You'll never get it back with like a 200,000 word tome. Like, you'll be not. So, like, even if you're indie or hybrid, you do have to pay attention to like a normal book length. I mean, with caveats, I know historical fiction and historical romance runs longer. I'm aware that a big Lord of the Rings style Brandon Sanderson Wheel of Time type epic, I know epic fantasy fiction is longer. Like, I get it. But in general, most of us, especially if you are a fellow romance writer, are going to be, maybe 65, 70,000 if you're a YA author. If you're, most of us, 80,000 to possibly bumping up on 100K and stopping. And that's just for convention and for affordability, even if you're doing, especially if you're doing your own editing and
Yeah.
figuring out what actually fits with what print on demand will do. So you can't be like, I wrote a 30,000 word book. I'm like, well, that's great, but that's not really printable. It's not really something you can take really easily to, when we used to have book signings, when, before there was Captain Trips and the plague. But it's not something that you're going to get edited because it's going to be so expensive.
You're gonna
It's
see
going
the
to
price tag for editing, and you're gonna be
gonna
like,
cry. You're gonna cry.
yeah,
So it's just, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm like, people are like, oh, I can have like the longest novel ever. I'm like,
no,
but you can't. I'm sorry.
no, you
But
can't.
even then, you're talking about essentially kitchen sinking it with your villains.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want to.
Sorry.
You don't want to. And here's where you can get your word count down. Forgive me, I fidget with my hands all the time off screen. It's a staple remover. Um,
Oh, okay.
so yeah, you want to keep your word count down, and a good way to do that is to find out what your focus is, find out how you want to have your villain. I Like I said, I like crafting mine first. um I'll do it either before the hero or while I'm working on the hero to determine how they could foil off of each other. Any villain henchman you want to have, if you want that person to be the foil of the hero, which can be interesting, more of a Starscream to Megatron, that you can also do. But again, you have to sit back and decide on which way you want to go. I know I like, I'll sit back and I will throw video game concepts into it. I like a lot of, like we've said before, my main wheelhouse is where I get my ideas from, and my wheelhouse is anime and video games. A lot of my villains I try to emulate from there, but not so much. Like, again, the whole watching the world burn. I enjoy those villains, but those are basically one-shot villains. And by that I mean, if you're writing a series, they're a villain that's only going to be in one book, because there has to be consequences for them. And the consequences, because I'm writing paranormal, it's not, oh, you're bad, you get thrown in jail. No, my consequences are usually death. Um, that was the whole thing with my Maxwell Investigation series. The big bad in that wasn't so much of a big bad, and he was even called out on it, which was one thing that I did to save myself, because I did not go and litter the other books with, hey, this is what's going on. So I had one of the characters, they're like, oh, we've been waiting for you and now's our time, and she's like, no, you didn't. And he's like, and that's when you like hear the record scratch, like, what?
Yeah.
No, you didn't, because if you were really waiting for me, we would have this whole big army around here, and it's just you two. No, you weren't waiting for me. You weren't preparing for my arrival, so don't feed me that. Um, you have to sit back, and I would recommend that anyone get, they have blank ones online. I went and I have a notebook around here somewhere where it is, I legit printed out the definitions of the alignment chart. True evil, like true good, what true good really means, and examples of true good. True neutral, lawful, I'm sorry, not true good, lawful good, lawful good, lawful neutral, lawful evil, um all of those, the
Yeah.
chaotic goods, chaotic neutral, chaotic evil, and the one that goes in the middle that I always forget.
I always forget the one in the middle too. Paladin. No.
No, I just know that the one square in the middle is true neutral. So that's pretty much the only one that I remember. Um let's see, it was chaotic. I'm literally drawing a blank right now.
No, but it makes sense. I mean, not the part where you forgot which square is which, but I think if you overwhelm with, I think that's a great analogy though, is like being a 1990s Batman movie or beyond, like anything like, oh God help us all, Batman and Robin. Like if you have too many villains to keep track of, then you're going to blow up too many plot lines in your book, and your book's going to be too long, which I've had problems with, I swear, in the past. I know you'd be shocked, but when you do that, you end up with just too many foci that get split. Like to really, maybe save it for the next book or save it for another idea for another novel altogether. But if you have too much going on with your villains, and it does split the impact of each individual villain and their ability to be chilling. So you need to not put everything in the first book. And again, you also not need to have like 160,000 word book. I mean, again, I get epic fantasy has different conventions, but even then that's too long. Maybe 120 for something that's a pretty long genre, like a very long historical romance or a very long historical or a very long epic. But if you're even like, I'm cutting you off 115, 120, like you just don't go further than that. And for most of us, like we write urban fantasy or PNR, and it's definitely going to be under 100K. And part of that is being like, this is the villain, this is the story that they're going with. Or in your case, for the Tempered and I can never do this, Lapis Sanguis, it's you're doing stuff where there may be someone who's sort of the bigger puppet master over the 5 books, but we're dealing with the individual contact or villain, they're with each time. So it doesn't become you should write that on your piece of paper and put it on a wall. Just don't become Batman and Robin. Don't become a 90s Batman movie where there's like 8,000 villains. Like it won't work. Did it work for Batman and Robin? No, it did not. It had 1,000 ice puns. That's not okay.
No, it did not. It did not work at all. It was
Awful.
wonderfully bad.
It was so terrible. Bad credit card. I can't.
Oh, let's see. I was gonna go a whole other way, and yeah, because
No, I don't know. It's just terrible. There's like 8,000 villains, and you're like, I don't care about any of
any
you.
of them, any of them.
If I hear one more pun about either plants and sexuality or ice, I'm gonna like just throw something at my TV. It's not okay. And I went to the theater. I was like 9, and I went to the theater. I was like, what did I pay to see? And when a 9-year-old is like, I question my choices, you've messed up. You've really made a terrible move. And a 9-year-old's like, I think I want my money back. Hell, why did this happen?
Yeah, this totally should not have happened.
Like a 9-year-old should not know. I mean, they're not dumb, but like, if a 9-year-old's like, this was not worth my, like, at the time, like $5, like, no, you wrote worse than like your average Saturday morning cartoon, like way worse. Because I was such a huge fan of Mr. Freeze from Batman the Animated Series, who does a great job, and he's so tragic, and he loves his wife, and he's one of those guys who's done it by degree, pun not intended, where like he
Hey,
loves his wife, and he's
thought you didn't want any ice puns.
I know, but he's done everything, and you're like, oh, I can agree with him, but until he's literally killing people and doing illicit science experiments to bring back his dead wife, like you can't, or cryogenically frozen wife, you can't do that. But like he's probably one of the most sympathetic of the Batman villains or Rogues Gallery, and it's just Arnold Schwarzenegger making ice puns, and I'm just like, I can't handle this. I remember when the casting came down, there was a big debate on if it was going to be him or Bruce Willis, and I always thought, even as like 8 or 9, I was like, oh, it should go to Bruce Willis because they can have him just play a very human side of Victor Freeze and just have him be more about, because honestly, you can understand what he's saying more, and he has a lot of history of doing things like even in Moonlighting where he can do very subtle things, and Arnold really can't do subtle. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, they should do him because he'll bring a lot of like just normal guy energy and pathos to, oh, nope, nope, they're going in a, oh, they did that. So I guess also if you're going to avoid things besides having too many villains, don't make too many puns with your villains, which kind of gets into they don't have to have like Saturday morning cartoon villain speeches, I guess, and monologues. Though I'm not going to lie, I kind of like the occasional villain monologues. So maybe, again, do as I say, not as I do. But don't make them have ice puns because no one's going to appreciate that ever.
Okay, when it comes to writing your villain, when it comes to the whole Saturday morning, here's also another thing that people fall into a trap when you're writing, and we'll probably do another episode down the line about dialogue.
Oh, we definitely will.
When you're writing dialogue, when you're sitting back and you're writing, just writing, period, you have to be careful because comedy is one of the hardest things to do.
And if you do it wrong, there isn't even like a respite. It's not like I did something bad and it was funny. It was just I tried to be funny and then it was just bad.
Yeah, and nowadays your comedy or something that you mean as a joke, it may not go over well. And you can't sit back and say, oh, well, it was a villain that said it, so it's okay. No, no, no,
Oh,
it's not.
I wanted to mention this point because you bring it up, and just from my perspective, and I mean, feel free to do whatever you want to say, but as a member of the queer community, like I don't need your villain to use certain words. Like I don't need them to use that particular F word because I'm gonna know your villain's a homophobic asshole if you write them well enough. You don't need to like subject me to things like that word, and you don't need to use the T word for people of the um sorry, transgender community. Like, and if you don't know what the T or the F word are, which good, you probably won't use them. But if you, maybe look up things that are triggering words for those communities.
Yeah,
That, like, I know your villain's a villain. They just murdered 3 people and like robbed a bank. You don't need to have them say those words. Like, I get it. Like,
yeah.
it's not okay.
If you want, I'm trying to think.
Oh, same way with how I hate when people go to the rape well. I know that sounds bad, but like Game of Thrones, if you want me to see that your villain's a really terrible person who hates women, you don't need to have like an extended, and I'm saying mostly to people who write, I guess, like thriller and like suspense instead. You don't need to have like a graphic on-screen rape scene where your villain rapes a person. Like I get it. Like you can mention it and cut to like just afterwards, or maybe not always go to the rape well and show that he's a really bad person, because there's other bad things people can do besides just treat rape like it's so commonplace. Game of Thrones again. um but yeah, I mean, if you're going to do these things, I don't think there's any time you need to say, oh, my villain's a villain, so he has to say the F word or the T word. Like, yeah, we're going to get it from actions. And B, not everything a villain can do to a woman is rape. Those are my 2 things if you're trying to show my villain's bad.
Yeah, um, that is pretty much what I'm alluding to. When you're writing, you need to be careful, especially since nowadays, um, there's a lovely thing called Twitter, and there is. I'm not gonna name names. I'm not here for. I'm not here for melodrama. I'm just putting out a warning, basically. If you write something that's overly racist, if you write something that is sexist and misogynist, I'm sorry.
Okay.
If you write something and someone calls it that is insulting to another person, they will call you out on it. Be it
And I was
And
gonna ask, just let me play the devil's advocate without saying words, but like, hi, I'm a white person. I don't know if you could tell because I'm super pale, but like, I'm just gonna get your feedback. Like, again, if you want to show your villain is super racist, it's 2020. I really feel you don't have to use certain words or terms.
you
Like,
don't
I
have
really feel you don't have to do
to,
that.
no, no, because there are things, there are microaggressions that you can use. And if you don't know what they are, bless you for your privilege. Ask a Black friend, ask a Hispanic friend.
Get a sensitivity reader so you can pay them for their emotional labor and them being exposed
Yeah,
to the microaggressions too. I always
yeah,
encourage that because sometimes your friends are like, I don't really need a microaggression today, but like, yeah, I mean, there are just certain words, like, at least again, I come from a queer perspective. It's just like, yeah, I get it. If you have your villain saying the F word to a gay man, like, I'm like, okay, great. I was gonna interpret already that he's like shot up half a gay bar, or he's done this or he's done that. He's probably a really terrible person already. I didn't need that in my face. I don't need, as you know, a queer woman, the D word in my face. I just don't.
yeah.
Oh, but
Um,
how will they know he's a villain? I'm like, well, maybe you're not a very good writer if you have to go to these certain words where I'm like, oh, here's my free speech. I'm like, yeah, it is, but people are also going to have a reaction to that, and that's where the, or for good or ill, comes in, like what your perspective is. But like, if you only need those words to like write a villain, then maybe you're not very good at writing villains yet.
if you want to write a villain and you want to show how villainous this person is, and I got a bunch of like oohs when I mentioned this. If you want to show a true villain, show how nice they can be.
That's a good point.
I have a villain that I won't say who, I won't say where, because when I get back to that line, it's going to come as a surprise. But I was asked the question at a villain panel, if we were at a festival, and they were like, if your villains were here right now, what would they be doing? Well, at the time, the villains that I was working with, one would be sitting back eyeing the next piece of meat that she would try to seduce and bring under her team. Another one would be off playing with children, like over at the face painting, just having ice cream, telling stories to kids. And the entire crowd was just like, oh my
Exactly. It's a variation of like, you can have the villain kick puppies all day, but it's more interesting if, oh well, they really like dogs, so they work at the SPCA shelter, but on their side time, they're also genetically creating an animal army of wolves that are like really freaky.
god.
Like,
You know,
oh no, I never suspected that. Oh crap. Um, and I would like to say,
see,
like,
oh, that's an idea.
that's what we come up with ideas on this all the time. Well, now they know a lot about dogs because they've worked at the SPCA, haven't they? But it's also their life passion. But like, with mine, even though it's a fraught relationship in Frozen Ashes with the politician and his brother Clay, like, there are scenes where it's pretty gentle, where something's happened and Clay's had an episode or he's acted out that day, or he, nobody can calm him down, but his brother goes in and calms him, and you're like, oh, I can see it, like, I get it. Like, 90% of this guy's day might be like, oh, this is what the pools are, this is your speech, this is your next rally coming up, but 15-20% of it is, oh, let me calm him down, I'm the only one who can. And like, we bring it back again always to the originals, but like, I do, because I think about Klaus. He can be a terrible person in pretty much every single way, but then at the same time, I'm tearing out hearts, but I'm doing it to protect my child.
Klaus is a terrible person.
Oh
Klaus,
yeah,
as
totally.
much as I love him, as much as I love Klaus in the originals, he is a terrible person.
Oh, terrible. He's like total
He is an,
chaotic evil.
he is awful with what he does.
He brings
But
on more trouble most of the time by being awful and uncontrolled than if he just like learned to stop
but
or pace it.
the thing about Klaus is that he has that humanity where he is unapologetically like, I am the bad guy. I know I am the bad guy. I will be the bad guy if it keeps my family safe,
Always and forever. But
until they kill him
yeah,
off in that
I
black
know.
prison that does not exist.
Yeah, the finale doesn't exist. But anyway, yeah, exactly. Like, I think that's a good point. Like, what other facets can your villain have? How good can they be? Like, they have passions. Like maybe they really are the kind of villain who genuinely likes children and gets their face painted with them. Like it's creepier to realize that they've got these other facets hiding than they literally are tying women to train tracks all day and going, Mwahaha. Like it's not as interesting.
That
And
day is
most
over.
people are not that way all the time. Most people. Now in
The,
real life, sometimes people are that way, and we all know who I'm thinking of. But like
yeah,
most of the time, people have other facets of size. I'm 100% evil all the time.
yeah,
And I can trick you with, oh, I think you're great. Like think about, God help me, serial killers most of the time wouldn't be as effective if they couldn't affect being normal, at least for a little bit, or
yeah.
in certain cases like Ted Bundy, like being somewhat charming and enough to like disarm people. Like they wouldn't be nearly, or like con artists, they wouldn't be able to get people to swindle if they couldn't, put on the charming act and seduce people for a certain amount of time to think that, oh, I've married the love of my life. That's way more interesting than I just kick puppies and say terrible words all the time.
That was the hilarious thing why people were flipping out about Zac Efron playing Ted Bundy. They were like, "No, he's too
Well,
handsome."
it's not like he's Edward Kemper or something, or Ed Kemper
They when
or
Netflix
Gain.
announced that Zac Efron was going to be playing Ted Bundy, people were flipping out. They were like, "No, you can't choose Zac Efron. He's too hot. He's too this. He's too
But
that."
Ted Bundy was like considered the
And it's like,
attractive one who went to law
and it's
school,
like,
so it
you
fits.
idiots.
I didn't find him
That's
that
the
cute, but
whole
like,
appeal.
yeah, he was definitely that guy who you would, oh, I broke my arm. Can you just help me, get this one thing into my car, my VW Bug? And you're like, okay. And then all of a sudden things don't go well for you. Like,
Yeah,
so yeah, but if your resort to like showing your villain is they're always doing dastardly things all the time, and that includes, always using certain language or always raping women, then you're writing a cartoon that's offensive as hell, and you're not
you're not
doing
trying.
very good ideas.
It,
Like you're not thinking hard enough.
no, you're not trying hard enough. You're not delving into the true nature of some of these characters. And I know myself as a reader, I'm not there for reading that sort of character now. There may be an audience for it. I doubt it, especially in times of now. Um, if you have to write out rape scenes, if you have to write out torture scenes, if you have to have it on the screen, there will be an issue.
I get that there used to be in horror sort of a Clive Barker-esque splatterpunk scene where it was very graphic violence, and I get that in some movies like a Saw or a Hostel, it's very graphic. But at the end of the day, I don't find, and I'm a huge horror fan, don't get me wrong, something like a Saw as effective as something like a movie where they cut away. Like even, and this is true if you actually sat down and watched something like the original Halloween from 78 or the original Texas Chainsaw from like I think 73, a lot of things cut away. Like, oh, they have impaled them on this, and you're like, oh, actually no, they cut away and made you think it. So I think there's a lot to be said for thinking things or cutting away, or if you're going to imply your characters do that, having it off the page. But again, does your guy have to rape every woman they see? Like that's my one thing is I got so over tired of it with things like Game of Thrones and like going, and also in the flip side, with Outlander, where that seems to happen all the time, not just to female but male characters. I'm like, if you have to keep going to that well for trauma, then maybe you're not really aware of other forms of trauma.
Yeah.
It can become repetitive and for shock value, and the shock value wears off and then it just becomes repetitive and uncreative.
Yeah. And and that is the moral of the story, ladies and gentlemen. Don't rape. Don't have your
Yeah,
character.
we will have to put a trigger warning on this one, or like hey, we talk about some things villains could
Yeah.
do that are pretty triggering, but like we're not a monetized channel for words. We're like, haha, we'll bury you forever. But like, I'm just saying that I think people get tired of it, and maybe more male authors aren't aware of it. But again, Diana Gabaldon is like, I'll just do all the rape, and you're like, okay, sort of tired of this. From what I hear about people watching the Star Show and stuff, and I'm just like of Outlander, and I'm just like, sometimes people just, it's maybe it's effective once if you're using it and you're that uncreative and like just the one time. If you keep
Yeah.
going to that well for shock value and seeing usually how it affects the male protagonist who's afraid about his girlfriend who's been attacked, or vice versa, where you see how Claire is upset because it's affected, I'm going to say Jamie on
Yeah.
Outlander, I don't know their names, or I don't know if I do.
Claire and
But
Jamie.
like, yeah, then maybe it's just too much and you don't have other ideas, because there are other ways to deal with trauma and pain and fear and villainous activities where you don't have to do it every single time.
And there are way more villainous activities besides just rape and gore porn.
Yeah, there really is. There
There,
really is.
you know, and I am not a horror person. I will never be a horror person, but I can appreciate that if you look at the horror movies that come out now, a lot of them are more just gore porn, like your Saws and your Hostel, to see what's the grossest way we can gross you out.
And that's an endurance test and not actually building fear or terror, which I kind of hate.
Meanwhile, you have things like Hitchcock from way back when, where they didn't show anything. And just the mind fuck scared the shit out of you.
Yeah, they do.
Even the original Freddy Krueger, that was more of the first Nightmare on Elm Street, the first Friday the 13th.
They're tame by today's standards. You'd be like, people were scared of that 30 or 40 years ago, but there isn't just endless carnage. Hostel is just so rough for no reason.
And even like even to go on like the video game side, take it to the original Resident Evil compared to some of the horror games that are now. You know, it's more of the mind fuck that scares you than anything. You're walking through a dark house by yourself. You hear the wind around you. You hear creaks and groans and all of this stuff. That gets to you more than anything else. Look at the original Silent Hill. The original Silent Hill made you're playing a video game. You're playing a PS1 game and you're getting claustrophobic. I think it was PS2, I'm sorry. And you're getting claustrophobic because your character is walking through this fog and you can't really see in front of you. You don't know what's coming, but you hear things all around you. You know, that is more frightening. The not knowing, the unknown is way more frightening than seeing someone's arm get hacked off because they're chained somewhere that they're not supposed to be.
And I get it. Like I like something like a Clive Barker short story or something like The Hellbound Heart from which Hellraiser comes. And his books of blood are very explicit. But there's something to be said for what your mind fills in and like what is expressed but not quite expressed, and your mind stays up all night going, oh, maybe it was like this. And I think horror really works best when there is that chance to cut away, and obviously there is some gore or some suggestion, but like your mind fills the rest in because you're so on edge thinking about, oh, it's going to come out of the shadows right now. And I do think that there has been a movement for a lot of indie films or partially indie films. A24 Studios, some of the stuff from Amazon, Neon have done a lot with stuff like Hereditary and The Lighthouse, and which almost isn't a horror as much as almost like just a very weird lucid dream, and Midsommar, and trying to think, just a bunch of them, like where it's more like psychological and about sort of a smaller family and they're dealing with grief, or they're dealing with I'm trying to think, the one that's A Quiet Place, and
Midsommar is a horror movie.
It's not quite, but it just involves a crazy cult, so I kind of count it underneath that one.
Okay, because I was about to say, I thought that was like the crazy cult orgy movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, it kind of is it's like a cousin. It's by the same guy, Ari Aster, so it's kind of like a flip side to like Hereditary. It's not the same cult, but it's sort of similar themes, but done literally in bright daylight because they're in Norway and it's like, or Sweden, and it's like June, so the sun never sets, and like it's really interesting. But like a lot of these horrors that are coming out, It Follows, that are being successful, I would say in the last 7 to 8 years, have been like thoughtful kind of indie pieces where there's the metaphor again. And like, it's not always the gore, it's the thought of, can I escape this? And a lot of existential dread of maybe I can't. And I think there's a lot more to be said for what gets cut from the screen, even in stuff that's obviously still more explicit than something from the 70s or 60s because of like censorship. But like, there's a lot more to be said for like what you can create and what people can fill in on their own, because people always imagine something scarier than what you can show. Like, no matter how good your CGI budget or your video game CGI budget is, it's never quite going to be up to what someone goes, oh crap, I imagined that and it was really scary.
Well, PlayStation 5 is trying.
I know, but it's just like the whole thing is, so that's one of my other advice things is like, there's certain things you can have the villain do, but I think Don's advice of like, hey, what could they do that's like seemingly super normal? And that's like what because how many times do you hear someone go, I didn't know he was a serial killer. He was a super normal dude. He was just real
Yeah.
quiet. And you're like, obviously that wouldn't happen with a lot of people who become criminals in different varieties if like they weren't able to pass as normal or actually seem like a nice guy most of the, like, true facts, Ted Bundy worked at a suicide hotline and he got an award for how many people he was able to save and talk down over his course of working for as a volunteer for that hotline. Like, that's weird that a dude who on the side is like going out and killing co-eds every couple months is also a really nice dude who talks you literally off a ledge. Like, that is intricate and it's complex. And again, things you might get away with in real life where we have people who really are one-dimensional villains, that's not going to sell in a novel. Like, certain things in novels, people expect some kind of complexity. And I'm not saying there can't be occasionally ones who burn it down. Like, I did enjoy doing like a wicked stepmother who's like pretty much just out for the pain and using leverage against her children or her stepchildren. But people nowadays expect something that's a lot more intricate and thought out and has villains with some depth and not just, a Ninja Turtles cartoon, in the morning, which I loved as a kid. We were like, why do you want to rule the world? Because science. And you're like, okay, I'm a scientist. I want to rule the world. And you're like, well, why? They didn't believe me. Or like, you've got to flesh them out, guys. Most of the time.
All the time. I would say all the time.
I think there's a risk sometimes of going too far into sob story, which is where I see like the Arthur Fleck side of like the Joker from the Joker movies. Like, maybe it's too sob story.
Well, see,
You can't go over the board, I think.
Here's why I say you should always flesh out your villains. Because you want all of your characters to be three-dimensional. Just because you flesh out your villain does not mean everything that you fleshed out is on the page. So you want to sit back and know, okay, this character volunteers at an animal hospital and at night they secretly they're secretly running all of these experiments. All of this happened because when that person was younger, they were bit by a dog, and they developed a fear of dogs, and so to overcome that fear they started working with dogs, but then they found out the scientific gene that they could do this, that, and the third. You want to know all of that as the author. You want to know all of that.
That I agree with, but you don't necessarily have to put it.
You don't have to put all of that on the page.
Yeah. Here, let me tell you my sad backstory in chapter 3. And like, you need to like either layer it in very carefully and know it, or maybe sometimes you don't necessarily give it away till the end, or maybe you just let it linger over a series. It just don't overload it.
Don't
on the page.
It.
Yeah.
Because he was always doing a cutaway every episode, wasn't it? It felt like
which one?
Cutaway. Doofenshmirtz from Phineas and Ferb.
Yeah.
He was like always cutting away to something in the past that scarred him as a child, and it's like, dude, really?
Yeah, like you learn to cope.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. You want to sit back and you want to go through it, look through it, see what you have. When you first start out, determine your goal, your word count goal. And I will say this. As an indie author, you are going to be paying for your own editing. The majority of editors out there the ones that charge per word charge anywhere from an 0.005 of a cent to 0.008 to 1 or to a 1 cent a word. And when you sit back and you think about it, 1 cent a word, that's not that bad.
80,000 words, $800, right?
Until you look at your manuscript,
Yeah.
the math, and your 100,000 word story then becomes like $1,000 to edit.
I'm cheaper if you need something. I have no shame in my game. But no, exactly. So I think that's hard with indies because there is a lot of possibilities. And I'm not saying that we don't do things that are creative and that we find different ways to market to specific niches. And so we often serve underserved stories that mainstream just gave up on because they suck. But I am saying there are certain conventions that do exist for a reason. So there are certain ways that you need to learn to brand your novels overall. There are certain ways that you need to learn to do word counts because of the cost of editing. There are certain things that you have to learn to do. There's a reason there's not a 300,000 word book.
Yeah. And then also, after you determine your word count, don't let that be the hard line. I will say this.
Well, there will be editing too down the line in different drafts.
Yeah. Whereas
there should be different drafts. That's a hint.
My books are, when I start my project, except for one that I have, the Asian male, Black female led book that I'm going to be writing. That one I'm going to try for 100,000 words. Now, here's where here's where I say you shoot for it. If you don't hit it, you're still good. All of my books, when I start making up what it's going to be, I put in my word count is 80,000 words. I have yet to hit 80,000 words. Because
I'm not going to talk about me. I'm a Russian novelist, and I usually have to cut things back in subsequent drafts because I've overloaded or over villained or over kitchen sink something or some aspect of a plot, and you can go the other way. I mean, sometimes you can be like, oh, I'm 110, I got to get down to like 95, what am I going to do, or vice versa. So it's okay to be both versions, but editing really changes where your target is and then eventually reaching that target, whether it's adding more or taking away.
See, All That Glitters was about 70,000 words. And Tempered.
As an editor, that's nice because like you run lean enough that when I edit for you, I know it's not going to get me bogged down. I'm not going to be like, oh my God, how many more pages is this? Which is also a good feeling for your readers who want to like be like, hey, there's pacing to consider too. Again, another reason why you don't have a 150,000 word book.
Yeah, and again, we are on a little news about the channel. We are going to be doing some more craftsy stuff. So there will be an episode about heroes, crafting your heroes. There will be an episode about pacing. There will be an episode about dialogue and all that jazz. One thing I will say about pacing is that if you read through it, if you read through your own work and you are tired,
the reader's going to be tired.
The readers are going to be exhausted. I've done that.
You're like, I don't like this scene. I'm like, well, who is going to like it? If you're the one who birthed it, then
yeah,
you should like it because it's your kid. If you can't even like it, then that's an ugly baby. And that sucks because like everybody loves their darlings, but sometimes you're like, oh, if this is too boring, then something's gone wrong.
Yeah.
It's a good hint.
Yeah. I'm looking at one now. I'm looking at one now in my current work that I'm writing where I had a scene, it's about 1,000, 2,000, almost 2,000 words, almost an entire chapter, focusing on this one character. And I'm like, I don't really need him.
Yeah. It's hard though when you lose words, but it's better than
his circumstances and everything. There's nothing here. It's supposed to be for what happens, it's supposed to be very heavy, and I don't have any of that here. And I'm not going to put any of that here because he was such a minor character. I can get rid of it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to go back, and I'm going to spend this weekend, and I'm going to be reworking that entire chapter.
It happens.
So, and it happens. It doesn't mean you're a shit writer. It doesn't
I
mean
mean,
that you're a horrible person or anything like that.
no one
No.
wants to lose 2,000 words or something, but then again, they don't want to bore their readers either, which is worse.
Yeah. And see, I'm also the pantser type of writer. And for those of you that don't know, there are in the room in the writing world, we call ourselves pantsers, plotters, plantsers. Pantsers are people that just write by the seat of their pants. Plotters are people that plot out everything and outline it to the smallest
Who
detail.
would do that? No, I'm sorry. It's just that we're very opposite in a lot of things. So you're lucky you've got sort of a broad perspective of like very contrasting styles. Even though we both write mostly paranormal and UF, urban fantasy, we have very different approaches to things.
Yeah.
For good, ill, whatever works for your system, it just is different.
Yeah. You have your planter. Most of the time I would think I'm a planter because I have a point A and I have a point Z. It's just connecting everything else.
It usually works though, I can tell. I'm not, now I sound like I'm just blowing smoke to Dawn hour, but like when I read her stuff, I mean, I'll have real suggestions, but I will usually be able to follow the through line of things like plot, and I'll be able to follow the through line of like, what are your villains trying to do and that kind of thing. So she's good at both of those with her planting. So, I mean, it's fair. Oh.
But then I want to say George R. Martin. I was about
He's the plot gardener, right?
Yeah.
Well, how's it working for him? Because it's been like 8 years and there's no book. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, that's mean, but I mean, we're all going to be real here. If you're a fan of Song of Ice and Fire as a book series, you're probably not going to get a finished book series. If the pandemic didn't do it, where there's literally nowhere to go and there's no sports, then it ain't going to happen. I'm sorry.
His blog says that he's working on it.
But it said that for long. I mean, I'm not a reader of the series, so I'm just like, oh, even I know how long it's taken him to get like new stuff out, and I just don't believe you anymore.
Yeah.
Well, the other one, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway.
And I think the backlash that he has gotten over the ending of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
I think that might be a reason why he's like pumping his brakes, because even he went on an interview and was saying how when you write, you want to be authentic to the characters, you want to be authentic to the story.
Sorry, I'm thinking of the Game of Thrones ending and how it made no one happy, because it was definitely not like that. Or at least at the very best, it did foreshadowing instead of actually building.
But see, here's the thing though. A lot of, and I've only gotten up to book 3 of the Song of Ice and Fire. The thing is, the way it ended, you could see, except for the whole Jon thing.
Yeah.
The Jon thing, I seriously have an issue with. The Jon Snow thing, I seriously have an issue with. But, and the Jaime not killing Cersei.
Yeah.
Those are the only 2 complaints, but everything else I can totally see.
Well, I think part of that is they rushed Daenerys going crazy and the dragon stuff. Like, it made sense. It was foreshadowed, but it wasn't developed.
It wasn't
season 8 enough.
It was foreshadowed in the books from damn near book 1.
See, that's what happens when you rush, because you think you're going to go work on Star Wars movies and then you don't actually do your job and finish a series. Showrunners.
Yeah, I personally had a tea party when it was announced that D&D were not going to be writing in the Star Wars universe. So yeah, that was pretty amusing in and of itself. We have a guest appearance by someone in Ivy's family.
It's my dad. He uses the closet. It's fine. I'm sorry. Also, I got mail, so that's exciting.
Yay. Um,
I have to
so
wrap it up anyway. My sister's here, and I still have thesis. Oh my god! Almost done with the full draft. Almost done with the discussion section. Just
okay.
going through it. It's due tomorrow at like 6. So
All right. So, um, so since we're gonna be putting a quick dive on this, we are going. We're gonna have our little. We'll do our recs. My recommendation for fleshing out your villain is play video games. They have some really, really good villains. Also watch anime. Anyone. Uh, um, also get the dungeon. Look online for Dungeons and Dragons alignment charts. Those will help you find out who your people are, and not just for your villain, for your hero as well, because I am going to write a chaotic good heroine. I really am. I can't wait to get to it. She's in book 3 of my series. So I'm pretty sure that Ivy will be looking forward to that. Those are my recs for this week.
I
I don't
apologize. You would think if I put like a sign, I don't have one, but if I put a sign that said like Margaret's office, don't disturb, that people would give a shit, but they don't. In my case, things that are good for villains, I already recommended. Just if you compare the comics arc for the Dark Phoenix versus the 2 films, like you get a difference in how you write. For one thing, you write one where she's an agent in her own uncontrolled spiral, and the other one she's just an object that's sort of acted upon or used as a token. But I will also say Killmonger, Black Panther, in Black Panther, the movie. I also think that Hannibal Lecter has a lot of potential. Like I would watch just The Silence of the Lambs, because actually, if you go back, I think Anthony Hopkins has less than 30 minutes of screen time in that film, but it doesn't feel like it because of his presence. And even in a movie with 2 villains, no one remembers Buffalo Bill. They just remember him because of the intensity of his performance.
they remember Buffalo Bill for the I would fuck me scene.
I was
That's
gonna say it puts lotion on its skin, but also
okay, that's it. 2 scenes.
to be fair, the TV show Hannibal has come to Netflix, and I haven't watched it, but I know it's one of those that really ties the journey between Will Graham, who's pursuing Hannibal, and Hannibal, and this kind of one of those we're not so different, you and I, but stretched out over 3 really excellent seasons. So I think it's like 13 episode seasons, like maybe there's 40 episodes total, maybe 39ish, something like that. But it's always I've always heard it's very good. It did end on a cliffhanger because it got suddenly canceled, because what doesn't? But I've just heard it's a really good layered performance on Mads Mikkelsen's side, and like on the way that it's laid out. So that's like sort of a different way you can contrast like a movie villain, and then how they do it to stretch it out on a TV format, and both that sort of, we're not so different, you and I. And I will say, I mean, this is not really spoilers because it's been 20 years, but if you've ever watched the 2nd season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I'm not a huge Angel Buffy fan as a couple, but I think the Angelus arc really works because I think it goes deep into something deeply personal to Buffy. Um, because again, it's been 20 years, get over it. Her boyfriend loses his soul when he has sex with her because he's a vampire, and there's a Romany curse and blah blah blah. But so it's the most intimate moment you can think of is completely goes wrong, which is a metaphor obviously for a lot of people who have terrible first times. But then he's obviously knows the inside and outside of the Scooby Gang, so he can harass and torment them in ways that no one else can. He's got permission to go into their homes. It has to be revoked, and it's psychologically chilling for the back half of that season. And then obviously and I won't spoil it, but he does something that where you're like, oh, maybe Angel can come back. Maybe it'll be fine. Maybe they'll fix him somehow. And then he does something that's so irreparably evil that you're like, oh, stuff hit the fan. So it's a great way to tie the villain to intimately on multiple levels, hurting not just the heroine but the team, and then pushing them to a point where you're like, oh, but it's still, oh no, they can't come back from that without serious repercussions or without
Yeah.
permanent breakage. And I think that's really important. So I think that's on Hulu, maybe Facebook Watch. I don't know. I get confused. But yeah, if you haven't seen that, I think the way Angelus is played is really interesting. I don't like if I have my soul, I'm Angelus, I'm not. Like, I think that's a cop out after when you see Spike's journey. But I do think that the way Angelus's arc is played originally in the back half of season 2 is really good. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so memorable that people still talk about it. So it must have worked.
Okay, so those are our recs. Next week, I really haven't had a chance to talk about it with you yet, Ivy, but I was thinking because next week I have a mini vacation coming up and I'm going to be traveling on Saturday, which is when we
Yay for
record
vacay.
videos.
Yeah.
So what I was thinking about doing was I was going to, because Ivy is eyebrow deep in thesis work.
And training for a new internship. It's been fun.
Yeah, and
I
training
am on caffeine a lot.
yeah, so to give Ivy a break, I was going to do a little tidbit of, I'm not sure yet, maybe a video review, a video game review, or a movie review, that I was going to just shoot it, post it, schedule it, and whatnot. So this way we'll still have something coming up, and this way Ivy will not have to stress out about trying to fit into my schedule because I'm the one going out of town.
Just
so
sweet of you.
so look forward to that. We will see you next week.
Well,
Same.
we'll see you next
Well,
week with your movie review, and then in 2 weeks we'll see each other as like
yeah,
a duo in 2 Wednesdays.
yeah. So we'll be seeing you soon, and keep writing. I think after that, I think we should delve in, since we're doing heroes, villains. I think we should do like heroes and heroines.
I would love to do that.
The protagonist.
And I'm a sucker, I'm sorry, for Hero's Journey arc, so I don't care if people hate it. But I'll also explain other things, like Dan Harmon has a good like wheel of like actions and stuff, which is pretty good. So anyway, we'll get to that in 2 weeks. So.
Alrighty. All right, so we will see you then, okay? All right, see you later, YouTube.